Hey everyone, it's Saturday, and I thought I would do a bit of a chat. Not really a G News update as such, but more of a attempt to kind of like just shine a light on a few things that I missed out while I was away on a 10-day break. One of those things that came up during the week was that Ryan Bridge commenced a new video base, basically a podcast show on NZME, because in the past, Julie Christie had convinced people in senior management at NZME that podcasts and video was the way of the future, and this is where the real bling was, that they could make more money. But what we saw is Ryan Bridge interviewing David Seymour in a fashion that was very similar to when he used to have to work for News Hub, and he was always constricted by a TV commercial coming up. So he didn't really go for the jugular, and he danced around Seymour, and he let Seymour kind of like introduce a whole bunch of red herrings and diversions, and it was pretty poor follow-up, really. There were a couple of good questions. Anyway, what they talked about was the Regulatory Standards Bill, and Seymour began by talking about how it was really of a great benefit to New Zealand to have this there from the point of view of more transparency. Brian Bridge asked the question, well, what is the actual monetary or fiscal value of the benefits? Have they been quantified? And it came to light, of course, that there'd been absolutely no modelling or any kind of financial analysis of the financial or fiscal benefit of the Regulatory Standards Bill at all. This was pretty obvious to everybody, and Seymour was ducking and diving and going all over the place, but Ryan Bridge wasn't in the habit yet as a podcaster of actually saying, well, hold on a minute, answer my question, come back to what I'm saying, stop diverting all over the place. In the end, they began to talk about things like pay equity as well, and how we can't really have pay equity here, but the real pay equity was to compare ourselves with Australia, which of course was one of those things that made all the guys at BHN laugh their heads off, and because they know that we have much stronger unions in Australia, and a national award and all sorts of better conditions over there, far better wages. So yes, we'd like to see pay equity with Australia for all of our low income workers, who are particularly women, who are fighting for pay equity after they've just had 33 cases kind of blown out of the water and all their hopes dashed, and been told to go to the very back of the queue again. And for most of them, they won't be able to make a claim stick anymore, because it won't reach the new thresholds. The goalposts have been shifted, and we've also got a case where the thresholds have actually been moved so much now that quite a few people who were once eligible will no longer be eligible, particularly large groups of people like 33,000 secondary school teachers, for example. As you know, this theft basically funded the budget for Nicola Willis, which is extremely unpopular with all of New Zealand. I think there's only 22% of us that think it was a good move, and about 33% said this is actually really, really bad for the country. And Talbot Mills told us that, yes, that's actually the worst result for any budget since we've been recording responses to budgets since 1996. So that's a long, long time. And Nicola Willis has managed to do it. She's really reached the pits. This is the worst budget, bloody terrible. I mean, oh my God, what an award to win, like the worst budget for over 2 decades. Well done to Nicola Willis and all of her friends, and Christopher Luxon. You guys are the pits. Absolutely shocker. Terrible budget, and based on theft, which I guess New Zealanders just can't stomach, and we aren't going to let that go. So good on Dame Marilyn Waring for picking up that one, and all the people supporting her to do the job the government should have done. But when it comes to talking about the job that the government should have done and the Regulatory Standards Bill, we saw again this whole area highlighted where David Seymour doesn't do what he talks about. He doesn't walk his own talk. Instead, what was going on during the lead up to the Regulatory Standards Bill first reading was that there was no regulatory impact statement. It didn't pass that test. There were big claims about good lawmaking and following process, but Seymour doesn't follow the process. Half the time he's just running around diverting the proper processes, and things are done under urgency. So New Zealanders can have no faith in David Seymour or ACT or anybody supporting them like the National Party at the moment when it comes to talking about transparency and good process and good lawmaking, because those are kind of vague terms that are being abused. It's sort of rhetoric. And what does it mean? It means ACT Party libertarian values are being imposed. And Jane Kelsey was on Te Ao with Moana, and she returned to some pretty popular themes that we've heard from Jane over the years, which is the ACT Party are trying to make their extreme version of what's good lawmaking the norm. So they're trying to make it normative when it's not normal, and we should get a better idea, a more middle of the road balance when it comes to regulations and what is really good lawmaking. So those vague terms have deliberately been used by the likes of Bryce Wilkinson and those guys from the New Zealand Initiative who are behind Seymour here, trying to get this bill in. Another point that came up was that it's extremely unpopular, that there was 0.33% of all of the 23,000 submissions were in favour, and that equated to about 80 submissions only. So again, what we saw there was this absolute disregard for democracy as Christopher Luxon and David Seymour try to ram something through like dictators in New Zealand, with their finger in the face of all New Zealand voters saying, to hell with all of you and what you think, very unpopular, but we're going to do it anyway because transparency and the ACT Party values. Third, there was another issue there that was really bad, and that was that David Seymour has appointed himself as the minister, presiding over an agency where he has hand-selected people to be in positions of decision-making about our laws. So the whole deck of cards has been stacked here, and it's very, very biased, and it's very unfair, and New Zealanders don't like this unfairness. They don't like being dictated to by people as well. So I think you're seeing a big backlash here towards the government after this shocking budget, the worst budget in decades, the Regulatory Standards Bill, the dictatorship of it all, the theft of pay equity. So taken together, all of these things are just adding up to an overwhelming rejection of this government. And the only people defending them at the moment are a few political editors, one at the New Zealand Herald, one down at the Post, a few commentators that are on a good pay wicket, generally lobbyists that are being paid in the background. And those people are really pushing that the government's right, that all of these things that are absolutely wrong are absolutely right, and that we're on the right track, and that we should just keep going down this spiral of decline under Christopher Luxon's ballsless leadership, while people like Chris Bishop attend the Aotea Music Awards and start rambling on so much that someone like Don McGlashan goes, what's all that noise going on? Who's this guy? Can you just shut your mouth, you dickhead? And then he realised, wow, it's Chris Bishop with a bottle in his hand. Other people were saying, well, look, this guy looks like he's well and truly trolleyed. He's really drunk. Now, this kind of behaviour, if this had been a Labour MP, say someone like Kiri Allen, someone like that, the news would be up in arms for about a week. The headlines would be every single day. And that would be, the case now if we had a neutral media, that they say they're neutral. If they were really neutral, we would actually have that news every day for the next 5 or 6 days about Chris Bishop. What is Chris Luxon going to do about his drunkenness? What he had to say about how supporting the treaty is just a load of crap, how triggered he got about, honouring the treaty, how upset he is about anybody supporting that, how he had no room for those people, how It was just completely out of order. And then the apology itself, that was in the headlines that were written by somebody at the New Zealand Herald, I presume, just wasn't present in any of his language. I haven't seen any follow-up information about this yet. It's probably going to be dropped like a hot cake, if I'm right, that the National Party have a grip on all the newsrooms, apart from maybe Radio New Zealand. Radio New Zealand, as you know, took a hit of about I can't remember the number, was it $4 million of its funding that it had previously been boosted? And there was a big argument over whether that was actually a cut, if you like, given that the austerity people think that they shouldn't have been brought back to where they could have been and in the first place a few years ago. So they didn't think that their cut was a cut. The natural fact it was a cut. And yeah, I think basically commercial media like the idea that Radio New Zealand struggles because they're in competition with them. So they don't help Radio New Zealand out very much. Having said that, Radio New Zealand picked up a lot of the jobs that those commercial media wasted no time cutting and letting people go into the gutter. And so Radio New Zealand serves a really good purpose, the public interest journalism that we require if we're going to have a democracy, because democracy is only just hanging on under the likes of Willis and Luxon and Seymour and these people that have no regard at all. Chris Bishop, no regard for democracy at all, absolutely just trolling over it with urgency, excessive urgency. One of my big critics, John Chapman, says that the urgency is the same under all governments. But as you know, when you look at the facts, you can see that there's been more urgency applied under this government than the ones beforehand, quite a lot more. So I think it's bollocks, really, to kind of like make excuses like that for the right wing all the time and also claim to be telling the truth. I've been told I'm a liar and a charlatan for pointing these things out. So as far as I'm concerned, that's the facts. If that makes me a liar, so what? Just on the topic of Jane Kelsey, I'm a big fan of Jane, and one of the recurring themes that she brings up is light touch self-regulation, and we've seen that over the decades with the finance sector always regulating itself, always softening up, people not being liable or held to account at the very top, and kind of incremental attempts to try and hold these people to account. But as we've seen in the finance sector, they run rampant, and people who lose are depositors, mum and dad investors. All of us end up paying and bailing out these people, whether it's on a global scale with the deregulation of banking laws and finance laws. This is the kind of stuff that's going to happen if we let David Seymour just carry on with Christopher Luxon in a dictatorship that just drives over the top of everybody's objection and pushes this into law no matter what. It should drive these people out of power, just like pay equity should drive these people out of power. If Thomas Coughlan was really the political editor, a neutral political editor, he should be carving into that. We should see Audrey Young outraged at this. We should see Ryan Bridge tearing strips off this. We should see all the people at the Post getting stuck into it, but we won't, because why? Why is it that the media always give this kind of stuff a complete free pass, a little gentle slap on the wrist, and that's it, and then they move on, just like, with David Seymour and all of his carry-on, all of the carry-on from Winston, that's absolutely unacceptable. I mean, why is it made normal? Why is it okay for them? And why is there a situation where someone like Dame Jacinda Ardern is driven out of this country by hate and relentless headlines, anti all day long? Where does that hatred come from? And how can the media claim that it's neutral when it is actually just letting Chris Bishop off the hook here? What's that about? No, So, finally, I think I'd just quickly talk a bit about the Reserve Bank. There was this meeting during the week, wasn't there, with the Monetary Policy Committee at the Reserve Bank got together and they had a chat, and it sounds like from what I can glean, listening to some of the commentary there, that the neutral rate where things would just be stable is around about 3%. For the OCR, and we're sitting at 3.25%, so they're likely to bring it down a little bit further over the rest of the year. However, there are these counter forces. For example, tariffs in the United States are inflationary, and this means that it's very complicated and difficult to know to what extent things will come down and what extent imported inflation will go up. And so those two kind of counter waves, it's a bit hard to pick. So I think what we saw there was some acknowledgement of that uncertainty in all of the language used by the Reserve Bank. It apparently used the word uncertainty 11 times in its documentation this time round when it came to the OCR decision. So we're living in uncertain times, and one thing you can be sure of is that growth is down. Growth is down under Nicola Willis. It's really bad. There's really no growth happening. There's very small amounts here and there and a couple of pockets in the industries that we've got. But due to all of the austerity and the cuts and the downs thinking, the poor thinking, the debt worries, that kind of thinking that's been foisted on us all, nobody is investing. Everything is ground to halt. The whole idea of growth and green shoots is a big laughing joke. No one can believe in Chris Bishop and his talk about growth. No one can believe in Christopher Luxon and his talk about growth, or any of them anymore. I just want to shout out to Deb Nawira Packer for her little comment on G News this morning about how the Te Pāti Māori family and Labour and the Greens are all together, so Thomas Cogley can shut up. So good stuff there, Debs, from you, and that's good to see, because what they're basically doing at the New Zealand Herald and at the Post is trying to drive a wedge. That they're going, how can we keep this government in place? And the only way they can think of at the moment is to exploit the racism that's underneath the belly of New Zealand here, that racist belly that's afraid of the Maorification or Te Pāti Māori being too radical, or the 8.3% increase in the budget that would give us free universal services for dental and childcare and that kind of thing. So, you know, it's this kind of mean-mouthed neoliberalism that's overtaken our press that is trying to drive a wedge and, exploiting racism to prevent people from voting for Labour because, a vote for Labour is a vote for TPM. But in fact, it's really just prejudice and racism and ignorance, because many of those people haven't bothered to do anything other than listen to Mike Hosking and those kind of people who are basically just hating on TPM all the time, and they don't get a fair suck of the salve, if you like. So it's just not fair, and New Zealanders need to be conscious of the fact that if you're going to call yourself a good person, then you have to be fair and you have to give people a fair hearing. And I don't think that we've seen that in this case. We're certainly looking at something absolutely horrendous from Judith Collins and the Privileges Committee that's just bloody wrong. I mean, it's so wrong on so many counts. And, for anyone to say that it's not racist, it's just for any, offence that breaks these standing orders, it's 7 times more harsh. And that, basically leaves nothing much more than racism there at the end of the day. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll catch you all later.